Reconstruction of typhoon-devastated areas is a major challenge for the government. Super Typhoon Yolanda's impact is a perfect example on how government can work with the private sector to rebuild devastated homes. Tonight on NewsLife, we are joined by a Filipino-American developer of a house that can be built in 7 minutes. It is a program supported by the U.S. aid. To date, it has built 50 and will continue to build an additional 250 houses. And joining us tonight on NewsLife is Mr. Rogelio Von Santos, founder of the Filipino United, and an NGO that links Philams for positive activism in the Philippines. Welcome to NewsLife.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Now, sir, tell us, what inspired you and your group to develop the Butterfly House?
Well, when we looked at what happened in the aftermath of Yolanda, one of the things that you realize is that we had a continuing pattern in the country of being reactive to the situation. And it felt that we needed to have a more proactive approach to our problem. A country that's facing 20 typhoons a year, a country that's constantly known generation after generation for significant disasters. It only made sense that we had a solution that was more prepared for these upcoming disasters, especially now that climate change has become an impact on our planet, and Philippines being very much in the center of all of it.
You said you're not an architect, you're not a designer,
No.
You're actually an IT guy. Now, how did this come to you?
Yes.
To create something like this?
You know, it's very interesting. I get asked all the time, are you an engineer, Vons? Are you an architect? In fact, my business is in technology. It's in biotech as well. And the reality is, when it came down to seeing what was going on with the people, the aftermath of Yolanda, there's a lot of very sad stories. It was a very, very difficult time for myself as well, seeing all the people that were affected. And so I think the first and foremost, what inspired the move to create such a thing was really just caring. Many of our groups and many of the people that were involved, we really cared to help. And so it was just really taking, just caring and putting our minds to a solution. And even if you didn't have the skill set, it was a matter of just trying something new, trying to push the bar.
So the Butterfly House, how were you able to actually design something like that can be built in 7 minutes and can be folded up also within that same period of time?
That's the thing. That was the science behind the Butterfly House. It was really... I was trying to provide a much more intelligent solution to the current approaches today. You know, if you look at what goes on right now, you're looking at a situation where a disaster happens. They're provided tents. These tents aren't really designed to last years, but sometimes these people are still living in tents after a long time. The next solution is bunkhouses. And then after that, they're given a temporary solution, a temporary housing in a bunkhouse to then later on eventually be moved to a permanent house. The idea of the Butterfly House was, what if it was possible that we create a brand new standard, a brand new norm, where when a disaster happens within 72 hours, we give them a home that is dignified, that they can live in and be happy about, and even if it lasts years and they're stuck in these transitional homes for so many years, they feel like they're in a nice home. And that's the whole idea. First-time solution is your best solution.
It was very interesting. We were talking off-cam about how this came to be.
Yes.
Could you give us a little bit of a background how this Butterfly House came to be?
Well, we back in December, a month after the storm, there was a lot of solutions going around. So people were talking about major construction with bunkhouses. I looked into a number of solutions like container vans and pallet houses, and none of them seemed right. One, they were either too expensive for the Philippine market. Two, our problem was so massive. I mean, 4 million were displaced, left homeless. 1.1 million homes destroyed. And you're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars for these other solutions. And the other part was there was hardly any construction laborers because the laborers themselves were affected. So the idea was, how do we build a house that can be strong, can feel semi-permanent, but can be skilled labor? And so we figured, I basically came up with this idea late at night and had this idea of a folding house. And I went pen to paper, started designing, literally took cardboard boxes, started pinning it together with tape, and lo and behold, the idea was born.
Now, you've been on the ground after the typhoon in Tacloban. Now, these houses that you're building, you're putting it in areas that actually are getting hit by typhoons. Can this actually withstand typhoons?
Last year, we deployed 50 units in Tacloban, and that was our test year. We were, when this house was first developed, even I had to see for myself if it would work. But what happened was, as we developed the technology, we developed the house, we allowed families to actually reside in it. We had a typhoon Ruby that came along in December. Now, that was a very treacherous week because we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what was going on the ground. But right before, I had instructed one thing. I wanted to show that the house could actually be folded prior to a storm. So we folded some of the houses up just to prove that it could be folded. And then the rest of the houses were left open. Oddly enough, in that one area where we stood, 76 project homes were destroyed, but not a single butterfly house was destroyed.
Now, people would ask, what kind of materials do you use to build this, and how much does it actually cost? Is it cheaper than what is actually being used right now?
Well, let's put it this way. First of all, in terms of cost, compared to a lot of structures, we are definitely very competitive. In terms of the material, you're talking about steel. You're talking about a material which is the paneling that we use is actually made of recycled sachets. It's waterproof, fire resistant. And so it provides a very, very long-lasting home, highly durable. In terms of pricing, one of the things to look at is that we actually average out to be less than 5,000 pesos per square meter, which is very competitive. But it's more competitive when you look at it in the context of how government actually approaches the problem. We actually will save the government a lot of money. For example, we save money in terms of not having to buy tents, not having to build a brand new bunkhouse construction project, and not having to relocate into permanent housing, because that same unit that you deploy once can be relocated from semi-permanent to permanent.
Now, the U.S. has supported your butterfly houses. Now, has the local National Housing Authority or the government actually contacted you in terms of how can we actually bring this to these areas more in a larger scale?
As a matter of fact, very early into the project, we were contacted by the DSWD. We were actually reached out to. We have a Senate resolution that was championed by Senator Gingona, which at the time I was actually very surprised to receive that because. Our group was saying that we were just starting out, we were developing this new technology, but it was the merit of the design. It was to him the new Bahay Kubo, the modern-day technology which represented the Filipino approach to disaster. In terms of the government, we have a lot of support from local LGUs that are looking to place orders and to rebuild areas that have been devastated. And we look to them also to help provide land and also to select families.
Now, in these kinds of situations, the Philippines goes through a lot of typhoons and disasters. Now, during these times, there is a need for housing like this. Now, how fast can you get it on the ground? How fast can it be built? And can it be mass-produced?
Well, first, it is being mass-produced right now. Matter of fact, the whole point of the butterfly house is that it's a system. It's a butterfly house system. And in terms of the need for the housing, this is the opportunity that we have today. Yolanda showed us that we needed better solutions because the problems are getting worse and worse. And what the butterfly house tries to show is that we actually have the capacity as Filipinos to become disaster victims to disaster response experts for the world.
I just want to go backtrack a little bit. Being a Filipino American and living most of your life in the U.S. Now, what made you do these being a very successful entrepreneur yourself in another country and now moving towards being a social entrepreneur here in the Philippines?
That's an interesting question. I think that when it comes down to it, there's a certain level of success you can have in business until you realize there's more that you have to do. And when I had to do my own soul searching in my life, it became very clear that my responsibilities lie with my people, with the Philippines, with Filipinos. when I started doing more work here in the Philippines, I realized very quickly there's a lot of challenges to, and so the approach was my life has actually been committed to, of course, as an entrepreneur. I can't take away the business side of me, right? But at the same time, I can always marry that with heart. You know?
Now, what do you aim to achieve from this? From starting from designing it with a Balikbayan box, trying to tear it up and trying to... Did you actually see the vision of this happening right now and what you see right now on the ground?
You know, I have to tell you, this project, and to communicate to the people, it is an exciting project. It is full of passion. It is fun. Although it is in the context of a disaster, it's a lot of energy, but there's a lot of energy that's very positive around it. And it's also very humbling. What's humbling about it is that it did start from pure frustration and an attempt to help. And within a year's time, over 8 countries have contacted us, over 20,000 requests for this house in various disaster sites around the planet. And so we actually have an opportunity to prove out that as Filipinos, we can develop solutions that are not just good for the Philippines, but of global impact.
And finally, what are your next steps in terms of trying to inspire not only the Filipinos, but also your friends or family or those in the U.S., the Filipinos who also want to be more proactive and not just bringing in money, but also them being proactive and doing things on the ground here?
You know, I mentioned to you earlier that I'm a big believer that when people want to help, they really have to love who they're trying to help. That's because when you love someone, you begin to listen very well. When you listen, then you understand the true nature of the problem and how to really address it. So my call to action to all those around is, you know, to listen very carefully and to actually take action. Come to the Philippines, visit the place, learn and implement. On top of all that, you know, I'm going to call out and challenge many of the architects, the engineers, even if you're not schooled in that particular subject matter, to go ahead and try any idea out, pioneer, innovate, because now is the time that the country needs minds. It needs us to really, really be inspiring, inspire others. And I actually ask many people to come and visit the Butterfly PH website, butterfly.ph, to actually come and join us. We have a lot of things happening. We have a lot of need for people to help us build the organization up.
Well, we hope to see more of you to inspire more people to actually be more proactive and on that note, thank you very much for joining us here tonight on NewsLife. That was Mr. Rogelio Von Santos, founder of Filipinos United. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.